Okay, this section, of course, titled Magneto Installation, because as part of your, you get those engines on the stands for test, you're going to need to be installing the magnetos. The two basic types of magnetos that we have available that we use is the slick magneto, looks like this, and got a nice data plate over here on the side, of course, identifying the magneto. So some of your engines will utilize that type of magneto, and then a lot of your engines will utilize this big 2-in-1 magneto. It's got one drive gear in the center, but it houses two magnetos. It's got both the right and left magneto on it. Okay. So depending on which particular engine you're working on, of course, then we'll decide whether you have the Bendix or the Slick. The Slick is actually manufactured and owned by the Champion spark plug company now, and the Bendix is owned by the Continental engine company, so it just would be some specifics there. Some tools that you'll need for magneto installation. Of course, the classic tool you'll be utilizing is the buzz box, and of course it gets its name because when you turn it on it makes a buzzing sound, and so you'll need to get yourself a buzz box. And the buzz box is special because the magneto, you can't use a multimeter to see that point opening, because if we review the magneto just very quickly, because we're connecting on, that buzz box is on where our P lead would normally be hooking on here. So this will be, of course, disconnected. And so, for instance, this slick magneto, you see this stud sticking out of it. That's where the P lead would normally hook up to. And that's where I would be connecting my buzz box to. But a multimeter won't work, because if I, of course, got my multimeter tapped here and of course, over here ground or whatever, then trying to see when these points are opening, because I have my primary winding coil, which only has about 1,000 to 3,000 ohms of resistance, my multimeter will go find ground that way. So even though the point's open, I can't see the points opening because of the current on the multimeter flowing through the primary winding of the coil. When you have a magneto apart, you can see points opening and closing if you have this primary winding disconnected from the points. Then you can utilize a multimeter. But when we're all together and going on the engine, then that doesn't work so well for us. So we have to have that buzz box. Another tool that we may need, if you have to tell when the magneto rotor is at the right spot where it's ready to send current out to the number one spark plug, for the Bendix magneto, you'll need to go procure this Bendix rotor holding tool. Just a cautionary, the Bendix or Continental folks, they would prefer you not to use this. There's a lot of aftermarket ones of these out there, because this is going in and actually grabbing a hold of the little plastic gear that's holding the rotor in place in there. And sometimes they had some aftermarket ones of these are manufactured with an improper radius, and somebody put that in too tight, could actually split the plastic gear inside the magneto, and of course setting us up for an airworthiness situation. The slick magneto, let me pause this for just a second and get one thing here. Okay, back with you here. On the slick magneto, you will need a pin. This is a pin that there's some holes drilled in, so the little rotor inside the magneto that's lining up with an electrode in the distributor cap there, that needs to go out to your spark plug. So to ensure that the rotor is lined up with the one that goes out to the number one spark plug, this pin is going to go in the magneto. It's actually going to go down through the top here, where I'd go down through here to a hole, which is then engaging with a hole in the distributor gear, which lines it up with that number one lead going out there. Okay, so again, you got the Bendix rotor holding tool, and then you have the slick timing pin. You'll also need one other tool for those of you working on that Bendix, the 2-in-1 magneto. In order to get into the P lead set, or get in there, they had a special little cover in here, and then there's a safety spring in there that grounds out if you remove the P lead off there. And so you'll need to check out these special little adapters that go in and put there, and then you would just be connecting your buzz box right on the end of that special adapter connection there. Okay. Okay. So a couple of things first on the slick magneto. So magneto rotation direction, that is always as viewed from the drive end of the magneto. So if I look at the data plate on this magneto, rotation ROT dot is stamped L. So it's designed to turn left hand. Okay? So as viewed from the drive end of the magneto, this magneto would turn left hand. Now that's important because, taking that off for there first, oh, no, I'm going to leave that guy on there. That's important because when I'm putting that timing pin up in here, there's a hole stamped with an L on it, and there's a hole stamped with an R. So which hole I put that pin in is determined by the direction of rotation of the magneto. So as I just looked, that the rotation on this was left hand, so then I would utilize attempting to put the pin in the little L hole here that would go down through and line up at the distributor gear that I just showed you. Okay, so to get that pin in on a slick magneto, what I'm going to do is, and every time that magnet comes to the neutral position, and which we would have discussed that in one of our videos, but this would be called the full register position, where the north and the south poles of the magnet are lined up with the pole shoes. But when the magnet rotates around, and the north, say, is up there and the S is there, I can feel that where the magnet is. Oop, guess I got you out of the picture here a little bit. Here, let me turn you around there. So back to my north and south were here. That was full register. Magnet rotated around to where I'm in now what's known as the neutral position. The neutral position can be felt because the magnetic lines of flux are trying to equally grab this. So it almost feels like when you rotate it, you feel like a little notch or a little click where it kind of clicks in on the magneto. And then when the points actually open, of course, we went through the theory of how the magneto worked in a different presentation, but it's right when those points are opening, which is just a few little degrees past that neutral position, is when I would expect a spark to be traveling out and ignition occurring. So that's where the point where the magneto would send the current on out the lead to the spark plug. Okay? So what I'm doing then, when I'm trying to get that distributor and rotor lined up where they're ready to fire the number one cylinder, I would rotate the magnet, and so I feel that little neutral position. Then I would attempt to insert that pin in there, give it just a little wiggle there, and technically it would be a little bit to the left on my direction rotation, but that one didn't line up. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate again to the next neutral. There'll be 4 of them, of course, because this has got a 4-cylinder guy. So I'm going to put the pin in there and give it just that little wiggle, and pin didn't go in. I'm going to go to the next one where I feel my neutral. Attempt to put the pin in. Just a little wiggle there. Oh, coming up on the 4th one. Hopefully I come to the one where it's going to work here. And, oh, yep, the pin slid in. So when that pin seats in down on its shoulder there, then you'll know that you got your number distributor and rotor aimed to send the spark down that number one lead. Okay, the Bendix, which probably the biggest share of you guys in here will be doing, what we're looking for, I mentioned that rotor holding tool. So I don't know if we can see it in the picture, but I'll rotate it around. Let me look at it with a light here. And what I'm looking for is there's a tooth inside there. I don't know if I can get the light just right, but there'll be a tooth right inside here that's got a red line. It's been painted red. And so it's chamfer. It's got a little chamfer cut to it, and it's been painted red. It's also very near the neutral position. But then what I do is I take that rotor holding tool, and I go in, and that's going to saddle right across that one with the red line, and then I'm going to thread this guy in. Whoops, ain't gonna thread if it's on there upside down. Try that one more time. Trying to work one-handed here. Yeah, there we go. So again, I've got the red line in the center of the window, which I can see you won't be able to see in the video, but then I'm going to insert the rotor holding tool, and now that I got the threads going the right direction, thread that guy in there, and he now holds that magnet in the that position where it's ready to send the spark out to the spark plug. One thing that's very important is once I have these pins in the magneto or that rotor holding tool, once this is engaged with the engine, make darn sure you get this holding tool out of here before you attempt to rotate the engine or do any additional timing in the timing procedure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the buzz box. So we had our rotor holding or distributor holding tools. But the buzz box, I always want to kind of play with the buzz box first. Make sure it's working. Nothing more frustrating than you're over there trying to install magnetos, you can't get things to happen correctly, and only to find out that the buzz box has a malfunction. So what I typically do, you've got one that would hook up to your right magneto and one would hook up to your left magneto, and then you have to, of course, complete the circuit because we're trying to see the points open. So we're essentially, buzz box is hooking up here with one of our red leads. The ground is hooking somewhere ground on the magneto, and we're trying to see when that point's open. So the thing that's kind of interesting with the buzz box, it's opposite of a continuity light in that, so if the lead's apart, so I've got to hold the ground and the red ones are just dangling down, not touching anything, when I turn, the lights come on. And then when I become grounded, reach up and I'll ground this one in front of you. You see how the light goes out. It also makes a different noise. So they have that buzzing or beep squealing noise so that if you're out in the bright sunshine and you can't see the lights, then you can hear the change in the buzzing sound. So let me just check the other side of that. So I grounded out one of them, ground out the other one, and both lights went out. So it's when the point's open we're looking for, and the light comes on, indicating I've opened the circuit. So that's where the drawing comes in nice, so you can kind of understand that, what you're hooking up to, and what's actually going on inside the engine. Okay, so there we were preparing our magnetos for installation onto the engine, getting them in the proper, where they're ready to send the spark out to the number one lead. Then our engine has to be prepared. And so we need to look up, usually on the engine's data plate, or of course in our maintenance manuals, you'll see something where our SPK ADV, and that's of course abbreviated for Spark Advance. And of course, going back over to our theory thing, as we were coming up on our compression stroke, a certain number of degrees before top center on a compression stroke is where I do want those points in the magneto to open and ignition to be occurring out at the spark plug in the cylinder. So on this particular engine we're looking at here in the room, it's designed to have a 25-degree spark advance, 25 degrees before top center, of course, on that compression stroke. Sometimes there might be a D in there before top dead center, but still the same thing. So I, of course, would come over to my engine. I would put my number one cylinder, we always time to number one. I would put my finger over the spark plug hole, start rotating the engine, and have it blow compression at me. Then I'm looking for my timing marks. So these Lycomings, they've got some timing marks on the rear of the ring gear assembly here that lines up with the split in the crankcase. Or if you're out front, as we might have saw in another video, you've got timing marks down here on your ring gear on the front, so depending on where you're at. So you got your front timing marks and you got your rear timing marks. Okay, so I've got that engine sitting at where it's expecting a spark, 25 degrees before top center on that compression stroke. I've got my magnetos ready to where they were ready to send the spark, and then of course I would mount the magneto onto the engine. Then what I'm doing, once I've got it mounted on the engine, I then, of course, this guy, the main magnet shaft there, get two hands going here at once, this main magnet shaft down on the back end is engaged into the engine. You got your gearing back there that's driving the thing. And so what I'm doing then, since this is, the engine's stationary, and of course, remember you pulled that rotor holding tool out of there, it was holding the magneto in place, very important to get that out of there. Then I'm going to be rotating the magnet because these points are connected to the plate inside the magneto housing. So this is going to be stationary, and I'm going to be moving the magneto about the stationary magnet and getting those points just to open while that engine is sitting at 25 degrees. Because I had my rotor holding tool in there, holding that at where it's ready to send the knot to number one, and then I just do that fine adjustment by rotating it one way or the other and get those points to just open, and the light comes on in the buzz box, and I will have timed the magneto to the engine. So at this point, I would normally say, any questions? But we'll talk to you later.